It all started with a simple notification in the corner of the screen. The discreet sound of yet another email arriving amidst a quiet afternoon at the office. I had worked there for years, always meeting deadlines, always avoiding conflicts, always maintaining that invisible posture that protected me from problems. The company was known for its rigor and culture of secrecy, a place where every piece of information carried weight and every mistake cost much more than time. That day, however, the notification seemed different, as if the system had taken a second longer to respond, as if the computer itself hesitated to deliver the content. When I opened my inbox, there was a single highlighted email sent to me without a subject, only with my name, as if it were a silent summons. The sender was from an internal address, but the domain was unfamiliar. The strangest thing was realizing that the message was part of a much larger conversation. A long chain of responses, forwards, and comments involving people from various departments, many of them in leadership positions. It seemed impossible that someone practically ignored by management, had been intentionally included in that debate. My name didn't appear on any list until I was added, as if someone had decided at the last minute that I needed to see it. The first thing that caught my attention was the tone. It wasn't a professional, polished, or diplomatic dialogue. It was tense, cautious, almost frightened. One manager mentioned the content found in the internal audit. Another responded with a sequence that was too short, as if he had deleted several sentences before sending. There were entire messages at improbable hours. 2, 3, 4 in the morning. Nobody wrote something so important at that hour by chance. The further I delved into the conversation, the more I realized they were dealing with something that should UNT have been discovered and that could put several people at risk within the company. Many parts were removed, replaced by sections marked as content unavailable, as if someone had deleted them before they reached me. Still, there were clues, fragments of sentences mentioning sensitive data, financial inconsistencies, unauthorized changes, and irreversible consequences. Each new line seemed to press against my chest, as if I could feel the weight of that secret even without knowing the details. I continued scrolling through the conversation with a trembling hand, realizing that my name still didn't appear, but the presence of certain surnames, there was enough to take my breath away. At one point, I came across something that made my stomach churn. A director was responding to another manager with a short, cold, and definitive sentence. If this leaks, no one here will be safe. I tried to interpret it professionally, but the feeling was different. The conversation seemed like more than an internal problem. It seemed like a veiled warning, a confirmation that there were layers within the company that I should never have touched. And yet, I was reading everything when I got to the point in the conversation where I had been included, hoping there would be some explanation. I found only a short message sent by someone I had never seen, with the text he needs to know. Nothing more. No further explanation, no instructions. Just that sentence that seemed to weigh more than everything else. My first impulse was to close the email, turn off the monitor, pretend I had never seen anything. But it was too late. The simple act of opening the message already marked my account, registered my access, placed my name within that chain that, until minutes before, didn't exist for me. While trying to understand why they had put me there, I realized the conversation had been going on for months, and the older the emails were, the more explicit the messages became. The first ones had no filter whatsoever. They openly discussed altered reports, decisions made without records, invisible approvals, duplicate documents all wrapped in language that made it clear this was bigger than I could have imagined. What scared me most was realizing that one of the names involved was someone I spoke to almost every day. Someone who always seemed kind, someone I'd never imagined involved with anything that sounded like manipulation or corporate risk. That made my world crumble in a silent and devastating way. Suddenly, every smile of his in the hallways seemed fake. Every conversation seemed calculated, as if I had been deceived for years. When I went back to my recent messages, my heart raced. At the end of the thread, there was one last sentence, sent just minutes before I opened my inbox, with a tone that sent shivers down my spine. He's already accessed it. Adjust the protocol. What did adjusting the protocol mean? Why was someone monitoring my email reading in real time? Why was I being treated as part of an internal process without ever being consulted. The idea that I was being watched at that very moment made my hands instantly sweat. I looked around, trying to find cameras, sensors, or anything that might indicate that this monitoring was common in the department. I had never noticed anything like it before, but at that instant, anything seemed possible. I tried to take a deep breath, but the pressure in my chest increased as if each line read had pushed me to a point of no return. I knew I needed to get out of there, think calmly, understand what was happening, but before closing the window, I noticed an attachment in the first email of the conversation, a single compressed file, with a completely innocuous name. Something generic like final report. Zip. It didn't seem dangerous, but the context made anything take on enormous weight. Even so, driven by a mixture of fear and a need for answers, I clicked on the file. And it was in that second that I realized that nothing about my professional life would ever be the same after that. When the file started extracting, I realized it contained only one document, a simple PDF. No images, no graphics, just text. But the name of the internal file made me freeze completely. Responsible Internal Data Review. PDF. The word responsible seemed like a warning, and even before opening it, I felt a shiver run down my spine. When I clicked, the document expanded on the screen in a clean, silent, white, almost clinical. The first lines were just formal instructions, but right below was a table of names, long lists of employees, grouped by department, each accompanied by strange observations. Some notes mentioned unusual activity, others review needed, and some even had a simple red code next to them without explanation. I slowly scrolled until I found my name, hoping it was clean, that I had been added there by mistake, that it was all just a technical error. But when I finally found it, I almost stopped breathing. Next to my name was the phrase, potential exposure, monitoring initiated. It was as if someone had signed my death warrant without giving me any chance to defend myself. My head started spinning as I tried to understand exactly what that observation meant. Exposure to what? Monitoring of what kind? I had never broken any rules, never participated in anything suspicious. My role was so ordinary that I sometimes forgot its importance myself. But there, in that document, my name was marked as someone who represented a risk for something I didn't even know existed. I continued scrolling down and noticed that the list of observations became even more direct on later pages. Codes, dates, access logs, internal comments about unpredictable behaviors, and in some entries, there were even hypotheses made by the audit team, as if they were trying to guess intentions. What terrified me was that nothing there made sense. How could they monitor behavior I didn't even know I had? And why did my name appear in such a deep conversation without me being informed of anything? When I scrolled to the bottom of the document, I found something even worse. There was a digital signature attached to signature. I recognized it was from someone I had lunch with almost every day. Someone who always treated me with empathy. Someone I considered one of the few truly trustworthy people in that environment. The file showed that he had approved adding my name to the monitoring list. It hit me like a blow. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I had experienced there, every conversation, every smile, had been observed from an angle I never noticed. And the scariest thing was that his signature was dated the day before. In other words, he had authorized it, even before I received the email. It was as if they knew I would open the message, as if someone was guiding my every step on that silent afternoon. As I tried to absorb everything, I noticed the mouse cursor move on its own for a millisecond. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to make me hold my breath. I glanced around quickly, trying to process the idea that someone might be logged into my desktop. The document flickered. The screen went dark for a second, and when it returned, a new window was open. It wasn't a normal program, nor a company system. It was some kind of audit panel with flashing indicators and real-time messages. At the top, there was a warning in white letters on a dark background. Session logged observer connected. I instinctively moved away, as if the monitor could touch me. That confirmed that I wasn't just reading something confidential. I was being watched at that very moment by someone who didn't identify themselves, someone who knew my every mouse movement, every scroll, every second I spent on each line of the email. The panel displayed a short text, almost too polite for the context, but carrying a brutal weight. Please wait. Your participation will be required. My instinct was to pull the computer cable, run away, pretend none of this had happened, but it was too late. Any sudden movement could be interpreted as an escape, and I didn't know how far those people were willing to go to preserve whatever was hidden in those emails. In a matter of seconds, A second message appeared, even more direct. Don't close the window. And before I could react, another window appeared. This time, a copy of the thread's initial message, but with an addition that wasn't there before. There was a new line, written right at the top, almost like a warning added manually at that moment. The words were simple, but they shattered any attempt at rationality I still had at that moment. The thread ends with you. My body froze completely. The sentence sounded like an ultimatum, but also like a responsibility, as if it had gone far beyond an accidental inclusion error. I scrolled down, trying to find explanations, but nothing made sense. The conversation ended where it always did, but now I knew there were people behind it. People watching, waiting, evaluating my reaction. And as I stared at that sentence, I realized that something profoundly wrong was happening behind the walls of that company. Something that transcends documents, signatures, and audits. I was at the center of something I didn't ask for, something I should never have seen. It was as if I had been pulled into the core of a secret that had been woven for years without anyone at my level suspecting. Then, almost automatically, as if it were part of a meticulously planned script, the screen went dark and a final message appeared, "You already know enough." And it was at that moment, facing that silent and definitive statement, that I understood that nothing I did could erase the fact that I had seen too much. If I stayed, I would be observed. If I left, I would be questioned. If I remained silent, it could be interpreted as hesitation. My career, which had always been so linear, so stable, was now hanging by an invisible thread that could break at any moment. And that thread, I realized now, was not in my hands. Even today, when I remember that afternoon, I still feel the same icy sensation running through my chest, as if the thread had never truly ended, as if someone were still following my steps from a distance, waiting to see what my next choice will be. And the most unsettling part is that since that day, I've never received another anonymous email, but I've also never stopped feeling like I'm being watched. CTA natural, safe, and fully integrated. If you've made it this far, I want to know, what would you do in my place if you opened an email like this? Leave a comment below. I read them all. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This really helps to bring in more stories and reinforces your desire to continue exploring these hidden behind the scenes aspects with me.